Hello, welcome to the final week of Consider This. So our web series is focused on simplifying the science and public health of COVID. I'm Marianne McDowell.
And I'm Heidi Beidinger, and our guests today are going to be University of Notre Dame's Vice President for Strategic Planning and Institutional Research, David Bailey, and Executive Vice President Shannon Cullinan. And we are going to be talking about and reflecting on this past semester with a focus on challenges that we've had and lessons learned. And we will introduce them in just a few moments, but first, sadly, we've got a report that this is the final webinar. We've just been reflecting on our 10 shows together.
So it's bittersweet, but we're ready for a little relaxation.
Yes.
So we are at the end, and we do hope that the information that we provided you found helpful and have passed it on to others. I will say there's over 950 people that registered for the webinar. So hopefully we've reached a large audience. Those of you that are listening, remember you'll have access to all of the taped shows as well as the educational materials. So please access them later. And we will continue to monitor our email, consider@nd.edu if you have future questions. So please ask them and we'll do our best to answer them. This is the last week, so I better say our little little disclaimer that the views that we present here are the views of Heidi's and my views, as well as our guests. Unless it's presented as such, it's not a specific view of the University of Notre Dame. And any health information that we're given is not intended to serve as, or should it be interpreted as, specific medical advice or substitute for the advice of your personal health practitioner.
Awesome. So
last time I have to say that.
Right, exactly. So anyway, for our audience, I just wanted to do a quick recap of the last 10 shows, our past 10 shows, and it was super fun going through all of them again. But as you guys know, we tried to provide a balance between the science and the public health aspects of COVID. And we've had some really, really awesome conversations. We've talked about food security and pantries, jails, the recently released populations, local research, and how a local health department has responded to this pandemic, recognizing the essential function of the department. We discussed immunity, epidemiology, surveillance, testing strategies and platforms. And I have to say, I know that I have learned a great deal during this process, and I hope that our audience has as well. So as Marianne already said, please continue to share the knowledge that you've learned here with your friends and family, and share the website with them so that they can access those materials as well.
Yeah, before we introduce our guests, Heidi, I think we should say some thank yous, and we actually have quite a few people we need to thank. So first of all, we're extremely grateful to all of those guests that took the time to share information and for all that they're doing in the pandemic. We're thankful to our sponsors, the Eck Institute for Global Health, the College of Science, and the Office of the Provost for supporting the series. That means providing the cash and emotional support. And for Think ND for hosting the series, and ND Studios for providing technical support. Some individuals that we'd like to highlight are Leah Valentine Barthuli and Mary Scott from Think ND. They've been super supportive and helped us along this process. And Lotta Barnes in the College of Science, she edited all of our videos. And Johanne Fahey and Michael Hughes from ND Research Communications helped us with the advertising materials. And the two technical support staff were Josh Baltazar, who's no longer with the university, and Richard Allen, who's hosting the web series now tonight from ND Studios. We appreciate all of their support and encouragement along the way. And lastly, Kelly Thompson from the Eck Institute for Global Health. She's in the background of the Eck Institute, just making the cog go and kept everything going for us as well. And thank you all for listening. it's been a fabulous semester. So I think that's everyone. If not, I apologize. I'm sure there's lots of people behind the scenes. Should we introduce our guests?
Yes, let's do that. Let's bring our guests onto the show. There we go.
David.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, David.
Hi.
Hey, Shannon.
Here comes Shannon.
Guys,
Hi,
how are you?
Shannon. Good. We're so pleased that you guys are here tonight with us. And I have a couple of short bios that I want to read for our audience so they know who you guys are and what you do here at the university. So as I already said, David Bailey is a vice president for strategic planning and institutional research and graduated from the University of Notre Dame in 1983, and then later earned his MBA from the Stern School of Business at New York University. David has been in his current role since 2012, where he partners with leaders across campus to build strategic plans and facilitates cross-university strategic initiatives and serves as a member of the President's Leadership Council. Shannon graduated from Notre Dame in 1993 with a bachelor's degree in accountancy, and he returned to Notre Dame in 2000 and has served in multiple roles. He assumed the role of executive vice president in July of 2019, where he oversees the university's operating budget and leads the divisions that are responsible for university operations. And for 4 years prior to joining the university, Shannon served as the associate executive director for the Center for the Homeless in South Bend, establishing it as a national model. So we've got a couple of heavy hitters with us tonight, is what I'm gathering, right? So welcome, David and Shannon.
Yeah.
You guys, thank you so much for joining us. You know, I've really appreciated serving on the reopening committee with you guys and learning about what you do. So I think faculty understand your positions, but, you know, many in the community or students, you know, when we think of university leadership, we think of the president and the provost, and people don't realize that you guys are an integral member of the leadership team and have been instrumental in implementing a lot of these mitigation things for COVID-19. So first of all, thank you for joining us, but thank you for all of your efforts over the last semester. But before we get into some of the details, Heidi and I always like our guests to tell a little bit about themselves, how they got where they are, why they do what they do, and also give a little fun fact about yourself. The more embarrassing, the better. David, can we start with you?
Sure. So first of all, thank you so much for having us, and thanks for that introduction. That was very, very kind of you. Just to give a little bit of background, so I grew up in Portland, Maine, and I did come to Notre Dame. And after graduation, I moved to New York, where I worked for 30 years. The first half of that at IBM, most of that time in sales, and then the second half on Wall Street. I was an equity research analyst covering the tech sector. So I was fortunate enough to cover Apple during its ups and downs and ups again, and that was fun. I covered Dell and IBM and Hewlett Packard, so great set of companies. I came back to IBM about 9 years ago in the role that I'm in today. I started in the Office of Strategic Planning and Institutional Research, and Erin Hoffman-Harding was the leader then when she went to Student Affairs. I took over that leadership role. Two things that I love about the job, and I say this to everybody, that I have the best position at IBM. I truly love it. And the reason that it's the best is the diversity of the projects. So we talk about strategic planning, but really a strategic initiative. So we have different projects every day, and this year has been no different as we've thrown into the COVID response group. But the other part is that we get to work with every single college, school, center, institute, and division on campus. So that's a really amazing piece of this work, is that we get to personally work with people, help them figure out what their priorities are, and then help them find out how they can achieve those. So that's why this job is it's a great one. It truly is a fulfilling position. My fun fact, not sure how embarrassing this is, but I was a proud resident of Flanner Hall when I went to school here. And when I came back to interview, I interviewed on the same floor in the same section that I lived in. And so that was a little surreal, I will say.
So what floor was that?
9th floor Flanner.
That's where we are.
Oh, that's awesome.
We're staying in 9th, but probably in your dorm room.
Yeah, we can talk about the rooms later. We'll leave that for now.
That's great.
Thank you, David. Shannon?
The how you got here is, and David's heard this, but I give credit to my paternal grandmother. She was an educator. She taught English, high school English, for over 30 years and raised 5 kids on her own. But she's the one who decided for my father that he was going to transfer to the University of Notre Dame. And that was, I think it was Christmas 1949. He'd been going to a college near home, about an hour from home. I'm from Avon, New York, which is 20 miles south of Rochester. He was going to St. Bonaventure and coming home too often. And so in Christmas of 49, she sat my father down and said, Tim, I've arranged that you're going to go to the University of Notre Dame. And that's going to be in January. Here's your plane ticket, go. And so that sort of started the connection. Like David, I'm a grad, so that's how I sort of found my way here. And early on, I did service work, which sort of positioned me that sort of, I called it the 3 M's. It was mission, mentor, and money. And really it's about mission. So I got to work at City Year, which was predated AmeriCorps, and the Center for the Homeless, and ran a business for a while. And so, so for me, I believe in mission and I believe in education, and had the privilege of going here. So that's sort of my short story. Fun fact, I did play a decent amount of bookstore basketball here at Notre Dame, and lost a bunch of times in the finals, and then finally won my senior year. We actually won
not
this.
Even. They'd submit the event because most of their.
Uh-oh.
I don't know who's talking.
That wasn't me.
Zoom bomber.
So yeah, you got one in.
So you still playing bookstore basketball when we have it?
No, Marianne, the back gave out. See, there was too much basketball that was had in my 20s, and so I just can't. And plus, I wasn't as good anymore, so I couldn't get out there. It's too embarrassing.
Well, you're way younger than I am, so.
Yeah.
Thank
All
you
right.
so much.
Thank you for sharing that. So let's move into a segment that we call Rumor Has It, where Marianne and I are talking with friends and family during the week previous. We tell them what our topic is, and then they pose things to us that they've been hearing as rumors. And so our first one is, Notre Dame will Notre Dame require students and staff to be vaccinated before arriving back to campus? Can you tell us if this is true or false?
You want me to I'll take that one, David. Now I'm not sure there'd be enough supply to even pull it off. So let's start there. Since we're trying to come back on February 3rd, and I call them the big 5 right now, are sort of healthcare workers, those that are going to be in retirement communities, essential workers, pre-existing, and 65 and older. And so I don't think we have to solve it for spring, but I think, before fall, are we going to require it? It is the question that's on the minds of my peers. I get to talk to them every couple of weeks, and are you going to require it? And we did that with the flu, right? We did require it for students, and I think we said strongly encouraged for faculty and staff. Now, people have pointed out it's a little different, but we'll see. We haven't decided yet, but there's a lot of chatter in higher education, I can tell you, about it. The other thing for us is just trying to be thoughtful about how the vaccinations might happen here at Notre Dame. Even in the spring, we have all 5 of those groups that I just mentioned. And so working closely with Mark Fox, who's been great on just making sure we're ready for that.
Well, thanks. So, the other rumor that we heard is that there were several students over the fall semester that were hospitalized and severely ill. And I was wondering if you could give us some update about that.
Sure. So I'll take that one, Shannon. So we did have 3 students that were hospitalized, that were admitted to the hospital during the fall semester. None were there particularly long, several days, and all have recovered. So we were quite fortunate. We have had a couple of faculty and staff members as well that were hospitalized, but all of those are on the mend as well.
That's good news. It's really good.
That's
news.
very, very good news. That's awesome. Because I think it was in today's Chronicle that there was a 21-year-old basketball player in Florida who collapsed on the court. Yeah. It's so unpredictable. It's so unpredictable. So good to hear that folks have recovered and are safe here on campus. So let's go into our next segment where we highlight some data that's related to COVID. And so I thought it'd be interesting to just talk a moment about the COVID data and the number of cases that were occurring while students were on campus, and now that they've left, their last day officially sort of was November 20th. And so what's happened after then, right? So I pulled out a few numbers. So the average number of new cases in St. Joe County has now gone down since November 20th. On the 20th, the average number of new cases was 310, and now it's 231. And then at the same time, the positivity rate for testing has actually gone up. So on November 20th, it was 12.3, and now it's 15%. So these are interesting figures and data points. And David, I think we have you down as the data guy. So if maybe you could help us interpret these numbers, or how you view these numbers. How do you interpret these numbers?
Sure. So, I mean, your interpretation is an excellent one, Heidi. You know, obviously we had positive cases every day as we went through the back half of the semester. And so the number has come down. Now, it doesn't make up that whole gap of 80. We weren't close to having 80 positives a day. But some of that decrease is because of Notre Dame. But the increase in the positivity rate is absolutely because of Notre Dame. We were administering 1,500 to 2,000 surveillance tests a day, particularly since, you know, from the week before Clemson all the way through the 20th of November. And so once that went away, it takes that away from the denominator, and it's really increased the positivity rate for the community itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
It really does. And yeah, and you don't know that unless you're talking to the people who are studying the numbers every single day, right?
Yeah, and I think
every morning, David, every morning, 8:30 a.m. was our data meeting. And David did a great job. He's being too humble on this.
Just one other thing I would add with that, I mean, just to show how the community, you know, what's going on in our community right now. If we look at the faculty and staff that have tested positive since November 20th, it's about a third of the faculty positives for the entire semester have taken place since the students have left campus, and over 20% of the staff. So clearly the community is seeing an uptick in the positivity, as you know, in the number of positive cases that we have. And we see that here in our own community.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I'm trying to just stay at home. Right.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Or Flanner Hall, which is safe.
Or Flanner Hall.
Right.
Okay, that brings us to our next section, which is headlines. And so on Friday, CNBC reported the title, "Despite COVID cases rising, more colleges plan to reopen in the spring." And basically what they were reporting are that college campuses are reopening because it's a financial necessity. And I was thinking, Shannon, this question might be for you to talk about, did the finances play into the decision to open or to stay open?
Yeah, it didn't for the fall. And now it's a privileged position to be in. There aren't that many schools. Maybe you can look at the top 20 and go a little further that can make that decision without some of the serious financial. But if you're tuition dependent, it's a really tough decision. You know, our tuition's 32% of revenue. And so it's a much smaller amount. At another school, it could be 80 or 90%. And so really, a really tough call for folks. And so let's say we missed the fall and students had to be completely online. Room and board for us would be $44 million. It's a big number, but it didn't have anything to do with us, whether we're going to come back in the fall. I can assure you of that. So.
Thank you. So the next headline I chose was published in the Chronicle of Higher Education last week. And it's our neighbor. Purdue made it through the fall. Does that mean Mitch Daniels was right? So there were 2 points that I found interesting. And the first was a quote talking about Purdue. Unlike many campuses, the university has not had to lay off or even furlough any employees. And, you know I have lots of friends in different universities. I mean, I think some people were even furloughed at local universities here. And I was just wondering if you could tell us what the situation is at Notre Dame.
Yeah, thanks, Marianne. Again, we were fortunate, right? And this is built over decades. Every once in a while, people are like, oh, great job with the finances in the last 8 months. Well, this is decades and decades of John F. Rays and Father Joyce and a few others, and their pictures are in my office here. And so we didn't, no furloughs, no layoffs, no salary reductions, and to date, no reductions in benefits, no 403B reductions. And some great schools have made that decision. Top 20 schools, many have had to reduce their 403B. And so again, just thoughtful stewardship, good fiduciary role by the board, I would say. And it doesn't mean that we won't have to look at some of those if this just keeps on rolling. But if you sit in my seat, you're grateful to a lot of people that went before you and to the good stewardship of the people here now. So.
Well, and to your stewardship, thank you. I'm glad.
Yeah, Shannon deserves a lot of credit. I mean, it clearly is because of decades of great fiscal management here at the university, but there were a lot of difficult decisions. We have some financial pressures as well. And
we do. And we have an exceptional financial team. To your point, Marianne, these are the people that you don't always see or know about or hear about. But, I have a former head of higher ed for Goldman Sachs that runs our treasury group here. And to the world, that means when we do debt and when we look at our liquidity, we've got one of the very best people in the country, right? And so we don't have to worry about some of these things. The team is talented and they're tired of hearing from me. We have a sort of modeling session almost every week where I go in and just ask tough questions, right? About, well, what about this? And why can't the auxiliary come back to that? And what if we had fewer of this, And so it's our ability to actually have those tough conversations that I think is, it's helpful, right? It's helpful.
Yeah, it is good to have a good team.
It is.
We're
It really is. Yeah, they're exceptional. They are.
So another financial question that came out in that article, they mentioned that Purdue spent $50 million on testing.
I'm wondering about that. Yeah, I saw that.
And I was just wondering, can you give us some numbers of how much Notre Dame spent?
Yeah, and Mitch has 50,000 students and we have 12,500. So you got to scale this a little bit. I still want to know if he spent 50 million. Mitch used an outside firm too. So for us, we originally budgeted, we thought 30 million for all in, Marianne. It was, now part of that is we actually have our own in-house saliva lab, which takes your test cost way, way down. And so we'll see, but we've also made a commitment that we'll test as much as we have to. And so moving forward, you're gonna see even more testing in the spring. But the board's been supportive and basically said, hey, let's do what we have to do to keep our campus safe.
Just as a follow-up, you mentioned that testing is going to increase even from the fall semester, right? Can you just say a little bit more about that, like what that'll look like and the numbers? Or
yeah, we did. David knows these numbers well, but I think we're about 100,000 tests overall for all of the fall semester, right? And towards the end of the semester, you guys know this well. We tested all students the week before a game at the end of the year and sort of did exit testing. You're going to see something closer to that rigor throughout the entire semester for us. So I would, I know this is recorded, so I'm going to hear this back, but if we doubled that number, I wouldn't be surprised. 200,000 would not be, that wouldn't surprise me at all in terms of the number of tests.
Wow.
Yeah, I did see that the announcement came out of what to plan for pre-matriculation testing.
Yeah.
You guys talk a little bit about that?
You want me to take that one, David? You want to take it?
Yeah, sure. You go ahead.
So the announcement went out to all students today, basically saying they will do a pre-matriculation test. The last time we sent it to them, right? And our county health had asked us if we would send it out ahead of time. We're going to do all of this over a matter of days, particularly for our undergrads. When they come in, they're going to have to go to the testing site first because their ID won't work if they're on campus in their dorm. And then they'll go to their dorm for 24 hours. The only thing they can leave for is their meal and back to their dorm and eat alone. So we certainly have learned some things from the first semester, but we will test all students before they come back. And then the following week, we will start surveillance testing. And so the rhythm is, it's going to be a little bit different than the start of the fall semester.
Great. I'm sure tons of people are going to want to know what's happening there. Should we start our questions, Heidi?
Yeah, let's do that. I think this one first goes to David. There's been a lot of talk and perhaps even some outrage over the last semester about holding classes in person. Will you talk to us about the measures that were taken to mitigate transmission in the classroom?
Sure. So we went through all 300 classrooms and implemented physical distancing. So 6 feet where we could, we were physically able to do that. We also set up a set of protocols around cleaning and sanitizing the rooms multiple times a day and deep cleaning them at night, and also requiring masks to be worn at all times. We also had to go through and turn about 30 spaces in campus that aren't typically used for classrooms, like Step-in Center and DPAC and Washington Hall, into classrooms for the larger classrooms, so we could try to get as many as possible. And I'm always leery because you never know 100%, but we have not seen any evidence that there were any transmissions that took place in the classroom. Given that the faculty members are typically more than 6 feet away from any student, and that everyone is masked and that distancing takes place, that we've been very lucky that way, that we don't think it has been transmitted in the classroom and don't expect it to next semester as well.
You know what? Well, I've got lots of follow-up questions, but the last point you just made about not seeing classroom transmission. So I was doing a little bit of reading about that last night, and IU had a study that they did of all the campuses in Indiana, included 70,000 students or something like that. And they too found virtually no classroom transmission either. So do you think that more people then are going to be moving towards in person? It seems like we've had this sort of natural experiment now occur.
Right.
It seems like other universities would want to piggyback on that.
I mean, we would hope so, as a university that really believes in in-person education and the value that you have by being in the classroom with faculty members and your fellow students, and then also being on campus and all of the great pieces of a Notre Dame education that take place outside of the classroom. It's just critically important for us to have our students here, and hopefully others will follow suit. But it is a huge commitment and a huge investment to have all of these pieces in place, the health and safety protocols, the cleaning and disinfecting, all of those pieces, the testing, all of that goes together in order to make this successful. I think with any one of those pieces missing, you increase the risk.
Yeah.
All right.
So I actually there was somebody from the audience submitted a question that would be a good follow-up for this. So I think I'll go ahead and say that. It's Fran Greeny, and she's asking, or he, Fran could be a she or a he, I guess. Do you have any statistics gleaned from the contract tracing regarding how, where most of the transmission occurred? In class, I guess that the answer is no. In dormitories, during athletic practice or competitions, or through off-campus social gatherings, or through other interactions?
That's a phenomenal question. I can't say statistically, but the vast majority of our cases take place in some sort of social setting, whether it's a meal with friends, watching a game together, or going to a party, right? And that's what we see, both of the students, but also of the faculty and staff. We see virtually every case taking place in a social setting. Often when people are eating, they take their masks off, and that's usually where we have issues. We just haven't seen it necessarily in the labs or in the classrooms. And in the dormitories, yes, but as I said, in a social setting. So if people are in a room watching a game together and they don't have the masks on, we had a set of graduate students. We actually had a decent size outbreak. They were all watching a TV show together off campus. So that's a pretty consistent theme that we've heard across the board. We do not have any evidence that it takes place during athletic competition or practices. We have had some issues on some of the teams or some positive cases, but as we go through and trace those, we see the exact same pattern. It might happen at a team meal or in a locker room when they're sitting next to each other, but not actually during competition.
I want to know what that TV show was.
So did I.
You want me to tell you?
Yeah,
It was The Bachelorette.
Oh, man.
Maybe we
I remember that day.
four of us could meet in Flanner on 9th floor and watch The Bachelorette.
That would be awesome.
Okay. I'll go to the next question.
Okay.
Shannon, can you describe the testing that was available at the end of the semester on campus? Oh, we've actually covered this question now. So let's go to the next one. So tell us more about what's happening with testing over break and who's being tested, what's the purpose of that testing?
Yeah, so now that most of our students have gone home, the testing site is still open, but we're testing largely faculty and staff that are, as we say, regularly coming to campus, and also those that are on campus. So you still have the Holy Cross priests, you have some students that are here. And on some days we're averaging, one day we had 900 tests, which was a lot. And so David and I are scratching our heads thinking, are all of those people coming to campus? Because it's really meant for those that are coming to campus during the break. And so we're continuing to test them, but we got people in labs, as you guys know, we got graduate students and the like, and we have lots of staff that are coming in too. So, and it's good for us. It's good for the saliva lab. It's good for us to actually have that throughput and to be working the lab.
So
And what's
we're
the
averaging-
positive?
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say we're averaging about 500 surveillance tests a day, but we also have full diagnostic testing capability for students and staff and faculty.
Yeah.
So if anyone feels ill, we're still testing all of them as we did throughout the whole semester.
Yeah, and if you're in the community, you're very grateful for that, right? Because you can get the rapid antigen, which is 20 minutes, and you get it, which is really hard to get in the community, right? And if it's negative, we'll follow on even with a PCR through LabCorp. So it's pretty darn good.
So with all of this beefing up of the testing infrastructure on campus, has there a thought to extending that to the greater community, or have schools? So I think I read that Mishawaka is going to be testing everyone, the Mishawaka school system, South Bend Community School System.
Yeah, I did get an inquiry from a few different folks about, hey, the students are going home and you've got good volume there. Could we use it? And one was we were going to continue using certainly the surveillance we were going to continue using moving forward. One, we're not set up like other labs to do that. And as you know, Marianne, our saliva is not CLIA certified yet, but it will be. Very soon it'll be CLIA certified. So there were some liability issues in there. But the big one was we were still testing our people, and we wanted to give our people a little break. They've been working 7 days a week since August. Just give them a little breather so we're ready when students come back in January.
Wow.
Let's see. It's been really increasingly clear that mental health has been an issue for students, isolation, but the pandemic in general. And can you guys talk a little bit about what's being implemented on campus to help with mental health challenges?
Do you want to take it, David?
Yeah, I'll take a start at that one. First of all, great credit to Laura Carlson, who formed a group to look at this really intensely during the semester and had separate committees of faculty, staff, and students to think through these issues. And they've developed a number of programs, and they've also they've started to advertise that more and more around campus. Specifically with respect to the students in quarantine and isolation, we have a daily care and concern team that calls each one of those students every day to check on their physical health, to check on their emotional and mental well-being, to make sure they have everything that they need. And that team has been incredibly successful. Another truly, truly dedicated team, another 7 day a week, day and night job for those people. But that's really, I think, helped a lot from where we were at the beginning of the semester to where we were at the end of the semester.
Would you, as a follow-up, have we had to make any adjustments for staff and faculty as it relates to mental health and well-being?
Yeah, I can take that. Now, fortunately, we did add a therapist at the Wellness Center, which was fully booked in the fall as well. But it's something we have to look at, right? To David's point, we did go with teletherapy and the like for students. And I think we got to look more deeply for faculty and staff, because it's really hard, right? We all know that it's hard personally and it's hard professionally when I come to work. So I think we've got to take a little deeper look.
All right.
To follow up on, not just the mental health challenges, but as the cases are rising in the community, and David mentioned earlier that the faculty and staff cases are rising, and it's predicted it's going to keep going there. So what are you guys doing to address the problem of staff shortages or expertise in certain areas?
Yeah, this is one of that Mitch article, he brought it up too, right? And Mitch sort of said, hey, we're trying to think about this. And so David remembers this. We did a lot of scenario planning back in July before the semester opened. But Marianne, to your point, this is one where if you don't have the right number of dining hall workers and you got to serve X number of students each day, what's the plan, right? And you got a power plant that you have to run. And if you don't have enough power plant workers, what's the plan? Fire, police. And so we're doing a lot more scenario planning around that. Now, the good news is places like the power plant, I think we got it set up pretty well of how we've staffed it. They're not near each other. They wipe it down. The other team doesn't come in. So there's a lot of that, but it's a concern. It's a concern. Dining's the one that we're going to spend a lot of time on, I assure you. And that's an area where we have had some infections here in the last 3 or 4 weeks, but we will spend considerable time on that, certainly in early January. And the good news is David knows is Mickey Kidder is exceptional. So the leader in that area is as good as we have on campus, and her and the team are working on it, but it's a real risk.
Yeah, we always think about classrooms and faculty, and that's all a university is. Not that it's actually an ecosystem that needs to function.
Well, Marianne, on November 21st, so the day after most of the students go home, we were without power for 2 hours, which never happens here at Notre Dame, but very quickly you get a sense of what can't operate here. And so it does. Think of IT. If you don't have enough IT people, it really snowballs.
Yep.
And a great credit to the staff. This doesn't apply to every position, but we have reallocated a lot of people this semester, dozens, maybe hundreds, to work on the COVID response. But if we need people to help in areas, we have people available, and they're more than willing to do it. And so that's been a great blessing for us, I think, this semester, is the willingness of people to really jump in and do whatever's needed, no matter what their experience or role is currently. So that's been a great thing for us.
So let's switch gears just a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about the outdoor spaces?
Oh, you guys are hitting the challenge as well here. Well, the success of the fall, right? We had library lawn, which students loved it. And so we've learned something that needs to stick around, I think, in the future. And we had bands and food trucks and all that. Well, on February 3rd, that'll be really challenging. But Mickey Kidder and Aaron Huffman-Harding and others are looking at what can we do in the winter, right? Particularly for that 6 to 8 weeks. And I can assure you other schools are thinking about this, but I talked to Virginia and I've talked to Duke and I've talked to Vanderbilt. They're struggling with similar challenges, but we have a few creative ideas that we may create some of our own indoor spaces that you may see on the quads here coming up. But we also do have some very large indoor spaces, maybe a few athletic venues that Jack's been at least willing to have a conversation about that can be open to students, right? If you just want to throw the football or play with a Frisbee or do something, but we're gonna have to get creative. So now we do have 2 ice rinks. Now, can you use them? They're indoors. Are there ways to use some of the things that we already have? But we're trying to think through on the quads, a couple maybe fun things that students can go to. We know adjacencies are important. Adjacencies to the dorm, and it's quick and it's easy. I can get there in 5 minutes, is important to actually getting them to show up.
Yeah.
So if you have any ideas, let us know.
Yeah. How do we create a culture of like winter enthusiasts, right?
Yeah.
So how do we embrace like the cold weather? Interesting story, Aaron Perry, when they were developing the Howard Park design and everything, he took a team up to the story. I got to see the presentation. It was stunning. Took a team up to Canada to learn how do Canadians embrace, this cold weather that they have, and brought back those ideas. And that's how we have this amazing, Howard Park. So when you're talking, that's the story going through my head. And that's how we have to think out of the box about this. Super cool. Yeah, that'll be awesome.
Yeah, actually, I have a question from the audience that would be a good follow-up on that. And it's from Lacey Airhern asking, what strategies are we going to use next semester to tackle social transmission? So outdoor spaces is one. guess I'm
Yeah.
posing to you.
I'll start. You know, we're trying to figure out, most schools had they had a compact of sorts, right? It was an agreement, call it whatever you want. And it brings a level of clarity. Now, here at Notre Dame too, we also want to empower our students, right? And so we're looking at that. We've looked at, there's plenty of them out there. You can go online and look at all these different compacts that people had, in particular with their students, but it was real clear, right? It was clear if you do this, then this is probably going to happen. And so we're digging deep on that right now, moving forward. Now, we won't have a football season and some of those things that certainly we're challenging it. You know, as David knows, there was the game, and there were things outside the game that were more challenging than the actual game itself. So that'll help. But the compact, which will real clear expectations, is something we're taking a look at.
And that's important because we know a lot more now. We know the how and the where and the when most of the transmissions took place, and we need to respond to those. And I think setting the expectations clearly at the beginning of the semester will serve us well.
How might that change from like the expectations that were set in the fall? I guess I'm wondering, like, does the language change? Do the I don't know, the consequences or the penalties, do those things change, or do we not do those kinds of things?
Yeah, we're looking at all the above, right? But there's a
Okay.
balancing act to that, I would say, right? There's sort of, you can start with, here's all the consequences if you do that. And we're talking about 18 to 22-year-olds that, right?
Yep.
So we want to empower them. And so
Yep.
I would just say some of them were a little extreme, I would say, and not sort of fit our culture in the same way. So I think there's a middle there. And that's why we have student affairs and other folks that really know what they're doing looking at this. But yeah, there were polars on that. So.
So I think we should take one more question before we go to the audience. And I guess maybe it's a big one. So what did we learn in the fall semester that's leading to changes in the spring?
Yeah, I can obviously go ahead, David. I can do, yeah. Plenty. I would say surveillance testing is just, I remember the conversations even with the medical community back in the May and June, wondering about surveillance testing. I think it's pretty convincing, and we're convinced that it's something that we have to do in regular number in greater than we did last semester. There's no question about it. If you ask me number one, I'd say surveillance testing. It has to be the major strategy out of the gates, and to pick up any transmission as early as you possibly can, right? If you look at the Dukes and the others, they did a lot of testing, they did a lot of surveillance, they captured it early, and it paid, it was, they received the benefits of that, so.
Because that's not how we started the school year, right?
Well, we were using the LabCorp PCR, right? And the saliva lab, there's, as Marianne knows, there's 2 or 3 ways you could go at this. If you had the Broad Institute in your backyard, that was a big win, right? So if you were Harvard and MIT and Yale and Columbia and Dartmouth, you could outsource your surveillance testing at a high volume with something that was right nearby. The other was if you had a medical system or health system and you were one of the big ones and they already had existing labs, you could leverage some of that in some cases. In other places, they said, hey, we just got to take care of our patient population. Or you build it in-house. And we did that. Virginia did that with a saliva lab. Princeton is building their own saliva lab. That's how you can get the quantity that you want.
And it's all about the scale. I mean, we started with around 250 surveillance tests a day, and then we brought on saliva, and that took us up to between 500 and 1,000. By the end of the semester, using both the nasal PCR and the saliva test, we were at the 1,500 to 2,000 mark, and we'll probably continue that trajectory into the second semester, as Shannon had said. So that'll make a huge difference. And then in addition to doing the broad population testing, we're also trying to build in some intelligence and automate sort of some more directed surveillance testing. So we'll be testing everyone at a regular cadence, but then also where do we think there might be additional pockets or clusters of positive students or faculty or staff that we can test more rigorously and more often to try to get in front of this.
Awesome.
I'll add one more that we're going to add a test that's a rapid PCR. This is a very hard test to get your hands on. So from a portfolio standpoint, we have 4 now, and I don't know many institutions that have that, but we have to be really thoughtful about how we use it because the supply isn't the same. Plenty of antigen, we've got plenty of nasal PCR, a lot of saliva. This one's really, if you went to the hospital and you needed surgery in an hour, you'd be taking this test. So it has some uses that we're going to have to be really thoughtful with the doctors about.
So we have these tests, the Sophia test and the new one.
Yeah.
Are you reporting back to those companies, like comparing, or is there any research being done between?
Yeah, we should do more of it because we've got really good data. And we've got, if you look at what they put out, when you're looking at their sensitivity and specificity, it's pretty small sample sizes that they're working from. And we have comparisons between the tests. And so, if they're, Marianne, we should talk.
Yes. We've been spending a lot of time on that recently, Marianne.
Yeah.
It's comparing the different tests and their strengths and where to use them best.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there was actually a question that was submitted by Fran Greeny, which is an interesting one, and I'll let you guys take it or I can answer it. It seems that there were almost no positive surveillance tests which used the saliva test. Do you think that has something to do with the effectiveness of these types of tests?
So I'll start, but Marianne, I'd love to have you chime in as well. So the short answer is absolutely not. The saliva test was not CLIA certified in the fall semester. And so any test that was non-negative coming out of saliva was then followed up with a rapid antigen and a PCR test. So the positives from those saliva non-negative showed up as a diagnostic test because it was a saliva referral. And that's how it came into the number. So we didn't report the non-negatives, but we did report all the tests that were done on saliva. So the denominator would be correct.
So what I'll just say on that is the PCR is extremely accurate, but we do think there's like if a nasal swab versus saliva is different levels of viral load, but the saliva test, the reason that we're not having all these positives is because we didn't have any positives. So
That's
it's very accurate.
Yeah, and
Can I just give a shout out to Mike Frender? Speaking of the saliva lab, Mike, faculty member here, he and the entire lab, we wouldn't have it without him. And he's been exceptional. And so thank you, Mike.
Yeah, I would echo that as well. And Melissa Stevens, who
and Melissa.
Lab.
Yeah, Melissa's done.
Yeah, she's one of those, a lot of hours, and and she has small kids at home and pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to start going through the questions. We have quite a few from the audience. This one's from Joseph Deitz. How many students have had long-term COVID effects? The long-termers, did we know anything about that?
So I would say other than loss of taste and smell, we have not had too many that have had long-term effects. We talked about the hospitalizations earlier, but I think that's the longer-term effect. We were fortunate, many of our students had little to no, but the ones that did, it's severe and it's serious and most have recovered, but some have a long tail.
Yeah, okay. Hopefully everybody will get back to their regular health. Okay, so this one we kind of addressed. It's from Michael Hoffman. I understand some of the uptick in positivity toward the end of the semester was due to indoor dining due to cold weather. What is the plan for dining during February?
Right. So
on campus dining? Yeah, we didn't do much of this, and the students will get the, God bless the students. We made them carry out for most of the semester, short of a few weeks, and then we did a little bit in October, and then we did away with it again. Right? So we didn't have much at all, and we're trying to figure that out. We're actually working with a faculty member right now, looking at our dining halls and what percentage can you put in the dining halls, right? If you look at the football team, they're still having some indoor dining, and you'll see the plastic and everything else. And so we'll see. My guess is we'll have really low capacity if we go indoors on the dining again. It just is, as David said, it's one of those things. Socially, the mask is off sometimes. That's where transmission can take place. So we'll be really careful. We'll still have the tents that we have right now. We actually do heat them with through our utilities. So think of the tunnels that are under the ground. We actually do use our utilities to heat those tents. They'll be active for sure in the spring semester.
All right.
I ask a small follow-up question. I'm wondering about, everybody having to do takeout and eat in their rooms or, in isolated places. What's happened to the level of trash
Oh,
that,
Good
great
question.
question. Uh,
That's a
the
great
sustainability
question.
people, rightfully so, right, are we're trying to figure that out. All these vessels, they call them vessels, that even if they're recyclable, it's a lot, right? That is
yes,
that we're working on. And the custodial crews that are out there, God bless them, they did phenomenal work in the dorms, because just imagine, right, what you had to do that didn't exist before. So we're working on it. We really are. Some of them, we started with the cutlery, where we're like, use the same cutlery. You can do that if you're thoughtful about
Yes.
this, but it's not. We've got to do better, and so do other institutions. They're dealing with the same issue.
and the thick plastic that's being used. I mean, the environmental impact that this is all having. My daughter brought home stuff. She was trying to be environmentally sensitive, and she brings me a stack of brown paper bags because they're beautiful. They don't have a stain on them, nothing, right? And she wants to make sure we can reuse them, and brought home plastic utensils. And I'm like, oh my God, you're one child in a university.
Yeah.
Anyway, something for us
Yeah.
to be thinking about. That hopefully we
And
can
we're working
get
on
our
ways even more
environmental
broadly than
faculty,
that.
working on that. Yeah.
Okay, this is actually a good comment that you might find helpful. It's from Carolyn Bednars. Going back to the pre-matriculation plans, for kids traveling from great distances, say flying from California to Chicago, they will not be able to arrive on campus, most likely until evening, given the time change, etc. Will testing go throughout the evening so that they can get to their dorms to sleep?
Yes. Yeah, it's going to be a long 6 days for the testing site, but they're going to have to do that. And even early morning, right? I just want to drive in from Chicago, and can I do a 9 a.m. and start my 24-hour clock? We need those students too, in all of this. But yeah.
Well, that's good to know.
And much to the credit of the testing site, they're going to run many additional hours to make sure that they can result the test as quickly as possible, so that after the students take the test and they go to their dorm room and quarantine them, self-quarantine, that we'll get the results back to them as quickly as we can.
Yeah, but Marianne, imagine the international students. There are all sorts of requirements that you have that are significant that the testing site has to think about.
Yeah, for sure. So this one again is from Fran Greeny, describing the son is a junior at Notre Dame and the daughter is an MBA student at Georgetown, which was all virtual. And she actually shared with her dean at his request some of the approaches that Notre Dame has used to make in-person classes possible, in the hope that they can go in person in the spring. And so they're just encouraging Notre Dame to proactively share the experience with other universities. So I think that was a positive plug. So I wanted to share that.
David and I are pretty active in that at the moment.
Yeah, and I was going to say that's a great point, though.
You had one today, right, David? You had one today.
Yeah, I did one this morning, working with another school. But we also had some focus groups over the past couple of weeks with undergraduate students, and it was interesting because it was a complex semester for them. There's no doubt about it, and the stress was higher, and it wears on the students. But they have a different perspective now that they've gone home and spoken with many of their friends and siblings who had a very different experience. So many of the students in these 4 focus groups commented about how much more positive their view of the semester was, given the comparisons to what they've heard from others.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is always like that. You complain about little things, but then when you realize how good you have it.
Well, thank the 2 of you and your colleagues. I mean, it was a long semester for you guys and the faculty. So
Thank you for that. I think maybe 1 or 2 more questions from the audience. So Scott Cassidy asks, what enhancements to the daily health check app are expected for the spring?
It's interesting. I've been, in the benchmarking we've been doing with our peers, we tied it to testing in a way that I haven't seen other schools, right? If you hit one of the big 3, and students do this, right? So did others, you were going over the testing site. And so I think in some ways we're a little ahead of some other schools in that you didn't have to call your University Health Services, which, that some of that got backed up earlier in the semester. We've tied it to that. I think David would agree. The trick is, what do you do with all the data that you have that comes out of the daily health check? What is it telling you from a strategic position to do differently? And other schools, I'm not getting a lot more, David. I don't know about you, about how they're using it that much more strategically in terms of the data and compliance. And so I don't think we're going to eliminate the connection that if you click this, you're probably going to the testing site, or if you said you've been exposed and you click this, because it just creates an efficiency in the throughput that we find very valuable. And I know I won't mention which school. Some of them got rid of it, right? They just couldn't find the value in it. And it's all on the person, right? It's just
Right.
the integrity of what goes in is you're entirely dependent on them.
Right. It would be interesting to mine some of that data.
Yeah. I agree.
Great.
Okay, last question from the audience. Joseph Dietz again. How many family members got COVID as a result of students returning home for the semester? Did you track this information?
So we do not have that information. Unless the student were going to self-report it back, we just don't have that information. But, I would just emphasize that we tested every single student before they went home, some more than twice, right? Pennsylvania changed their rules halfway through. And so many people from Pennsylvania tested, they had to come back in to have a different type of test. So we tested everyone at least once and some twice before they went home. And so.
And we kept them in quarantine and isolation the whole time, those that were.
How many students had to stay here for Thanksgiving?
I was gonna say Thanksgiving Day was around 50 is my memory. But daily care and concern calls happen and meals and all of that. And not that you want to be in a hotel room on Thanksgiving, but I think families were grateful that they could finish it here.
All right.
We have to wrap it up. We have to go to our lightning round.
Yep.
But you know what? If I could just make an observation, the way that the two of you have reflected on the fall, it seems to be all this problem-solving mode, right? It's like another thing presented itself. It didn't seem to derail you, at least it's not coming out in this conversation, but it's you just keep working the next problem. You just keep working the next problem. And you're so complimentary of the folks that you're working with. It almost sounds too good to be true.
No, they're
pretty amazing. It is pretty amazing.
Extraordinary.
The ability of people and their willingness to take on new roles and become empowered and drive change. The pace of change was outstanding.
Yeah.
Outstanding. Those are some of the things we want to keep at Notre Dame once the pandemic has passed, is this sort of entrepreneurial, innovative culture and willingness to change. And the pace of change have been phenomenal.
And if you think culture is amorphous, this is a very tangible way to look at it and say, wow, those norms really came out. People were committed in ways that were, over the top.
It says a whole lot about the human being's purpose. We have this thing in front of us that we need to solve, and we want to contribute, don't we? I mean, when we're asked to contribute, we want to contribute to those things. Last week we had our health officer on the call, and he's like, I'm going to need volunteers. And Marianne and I online, we're already like, we'll do it.
Yeah.
It's like when there's a call, when there's a need, it's like, we're going to rise to that. That's awesome.
The other I'd say is this virus will humble you. So I stay humble.
Yeah.
That would be my
Definitely.
recommendation.
All right. You guys ready for a lightning round?
Sure.
Here we go. All right, David, what is your superpower?
Oh, what's my superpower? Ooh, that's a good one. I think that the minute I wake up, I'm wide awake and I can start going.
That's the opposite. Mari Lynn's like, she can fall asleep anywhere.
Right, exactly. Shannon, what's yours?
I'd say stamina. I can go 10 months without much time off.
Well, you
Which
probably
you just
need,
proved.
yeah. Okay, Shannon, what is the last show you binged and loved?
Oh, there's only one show I watch. It's because my 11-year-old daughter wants to watch it, and that's The Voice. So if I can get home and watch that with her, that's a priority. Otherwise, not a lot of TV.
Nice to share that. Hey, David, what about you?
So we have been re-binging The West Wing.
So have we.
And it's going off of Netflix on December 24th. So we're on the last season and we're going toward the end and we're going to make it. We're dedicated to make it.
Well, you better get home, I guess.
That's awesome. Okay, David, what is your most treasured possession?
Oh, wow. I'm not even sure what that is. I would say my album collection. That's
Oh.
probably my most prized possession.
And Shannon?
Showing your age.
No doubt.
I'd say my family first, and if you're asking a thing, I'd say my baby grand piano.
Oh, nice.
You play?
I do. Yeah.
Oh,
Good
that's
stress
nice.
relief.
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna skip to the last one. Shannon, what are you what are you deeply grateful for right now?
My wife and my health.
David?
So absolutely my family. The other part is the people we've worked with this semester. I mean, they have sacrificed so much every day, every single person. Just grateful for that.
Wow.
Well,
Thank you for that.
you guys, this was fabulous. You were the best guests to have for our last session. So we really, really, really appreciate it. And
You guys made it easy. Thank you.
That's very kind. Thank you so much.
no,
Yeah.
you're welcome.
Thanks
And
for doing it.
Oh,
know,
you're
sure.
very welcome. I think, I don't know if I said earlier that we've had 950 people register for this. They're not live now, but they watch the resources. And so I think it has been a service. So
Yep.
thank you to all the people who registered. And thank you. I didn't read the comments, but a lot of people posted comments in the chat today and questions and answers, thanking Heidi and I for that. So we appreciate that.
We do.
And just remember to share the information as you go forward, and consider this: the more you know, the more good you can do.
So be informed and act on accurate information.
And share reliable information with others.
And be kind and give grace to each other. Happy holidays, everybody.
holidays.
Bye, you guys.
So much.